of the repression and suffering in Tibet has emerged for the Tibetan people, but indeed for the whole world, a bright light in that darkness, and that bright light is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And when he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize 34 years ago, it was a recognition by the international community of his extraordinary leadership, his extraordinary qualities, his extraordinary contribution, both as a spiritual leader, and a spiritual leader not only for Tibetan Buddhists, but for people around the world of all faiths who seek recognition of human life, human dignity, human freedom, whatever tradition they come from. But also his great leadership as a true voice for freedom and for peace around the world. I had, as was just mentioned, the great privilege of traveling earlier this year to Dharamsala and having an audience with His Holiness. I have to say it seems a little bit easier for me to get to Dharamsala than it did tonight for me to get to Plumstead. but it was a great privilege to go to Dharamsala and to meet His Holiness, and also I had about an hour with the Sikyong as well. And I had been able, in the book that was mentioned, the book that I have here, The China Nexus, I had been able to do an interview with His Holiness the previous year, an interview in written form, where his office very generously gave me permission to quote His Holiness directly in the book. And so when I had the audience with him, it was a wonderful moment to be able to present the book to him. And on the cover of the book, the image, you probably can't see it from there, but in the image there's an image of Hong Kongers, there's an image of Uyghurs, and there's an image of the Tibetan flag. And as soon as the book was in His Holiness's hands, he immediately saw the Tibetan flag and pointed at it and smiled. And that was a wonderful moment. It's been a privilege for me over the last few years to get to know the Tibetan community in different parts of the world a little bit more. I have, from the very beginning that I began advocating for human rights around Asia, I have always felt in my heart a support for Tibet, a solidarity with Tibet. But it's also fair to say that until the last few years, I was more active on other human rights issues. The situation in Myanmar, the situation in North Korea, and then under the Chinese Communist Party's repression, I've been especially active on Hong Kong, on the genocide of the Uyghurs, and on human rights issues in China itself. But over the last few years, particularly when I was researching this book, I came to know much more in depth about Tibet. I came to meet more Tibetans. I've had the privilege over the last year of joining you, the Tibetan community, on Tibet National Day earlier this year, of joining the Geneva Forum just a few weeks ago, organized by the CTA, and it was a pleasure to be with my friend Sonam Frazi and other friends there. I visited the Tibetan community in Toronto, to the amazing Tibet Center and monastery temple in Toronto. And I've also had the privilege of meeting with the Sikyong on several occasions. I first met the Sikyong about 3 years ago in Rome. We've also met in London, we met in Dharamsala, and just a few weeks ago we met again by chance. I didn't know I was going to meet him in Ottawa. He was visiting Ottawa and I was there at the same time, and we met again at a reception for him. I believe that it is very appropriate that as we mark the 34th anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize for His Holiness, we also think tomorrow of the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and indeed today, the 75th anniversary of the Genocide Convention. And I believe whether or not people declare it legally or officially as a genocide, I think what people in Tibet are facing meets the definition of genocide, and certainly they are facing terrible atrocities. But we also know that today the Uyghur people consider today Uyghur Genocide Day. And so as we reflect on the anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize for His Holiness, let us renew our solidarity not only with Tibetans but with Uyghurs. And also yesterday was the 76th birthday of the very prominent Hong Kong political prisoner, Jimmy Lai, who has been in prison for the last 3 years. He spent yesterday yet another birthday separated from his family. And again, as I express solidarity with Tibetans on this anniversary, let us strengthen our solidarity with Hong Kong as well. I believe all of these groups, Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, and indeed dissidents, Falun Gong practitioners, Christians, lawyers, human rights defenders across mainland China, everybody who's united by a common cause in opposing the dictatorship of the Chinese Communist Party, should work together and form a united front to counter the CCP's united front. And I know you are already doing this. I see more and more at events that I go to, Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, and others standing together. And I applaud that, and I encourage you to do more of that. I'd like to close by reading just a few paragraphs from the end of the chapter on Tibet